Excuse me, ladies. If anybody has empty seats at their table, please hold up with your fingers how many empty seats there are. People, we need empty seats. Please stand up and hold up a finger if you have empty seats at your table. We have 4 empty seats up here. 1 empty seat at table something. 2 at table 9. I think we have 3 at table 4. 1 at table 11, going once, going twice. I think we still have empty seats at, what table is that, Betsy? We have 1 seat at table 20, 2 seats at table 12, 1 seat at table 10, no, 1 seat at table 6. Okay, wave furiously if you still need a seat. I think we are good. Thank you. Ladies, we have 3 seats at table 10. 2 seats at table 9. I think we're good.
not a wedding. Don't care. Ladies, please come in and take your seats. We're going to get started with our business meeting in about a minute. Is Helen coming up? Helen and Marshall? Okay. A couple of them are. Not doing anything. No. Actually, if he wants to donate to our unique boutique, no, there's nothing. Right next to the purple coat. Either there or around the other side. Jay, next to me. Next to me. For Helen. Next to me. Right next to Gail. Or maybe she's going over there. Empty. Can't tell. No, she said no. Okay, it's fine. Did you see the announcement? Okay, we're going to get started. Please take your seats. If you're still looking for a seat and can't find one, just raise your hand. We will help you. She's sitting right there. That could be her place. Well, then that's her. Ladies, we need everyone seated and quiet, please. Shh. Take your seats, take your seats. We're thrilled that everybody is here and happy to see one another, but we do have a business meeting to get through. Shh. Thank you. Our meeting is officially called to order. I am Freddie Silverman, one of the co-presidents, and my co-president is Gail Glick. We would like to welcome all of you to our fourth Sisterhood Luncheon program of this year. They have all been terrific. This one will be as well. We have a great crowd today, as you can see, and we'll once again be running the business meeting from the stage so that everyone can see and hear us. People in the back, can you see and hear? Yes? All right. Thumbs up. To avoid disturbing those around you, please refrain from conversations during the business meeting and, of course, during the speaker. Remember that we have an hour for lunch. You can talk to your heart's content during lunch for that hour only. Also, we remind you to please mute or turn off your cell phones. Don't just turn down the volume. That does not turn off the ringer. So please put it on silent or turn it off completely. At every table, there are name tags with markers. Please take a moment, if you haven't already, fill one out, put it on, and introduce yourselves to anyone that you don't know at your table or at other tables. Okay, first, a few thank yous. Number one, to Michelle Weisbrot and her team, the sign-in crew. Every month, I don't know how Michelle does it, but she keeps track of all these registrations going in, going out, people making changes, And we have successfully worked with a wait list also for people that were not able to get in by the deadline. To our decorations committee, how pretty was this room? I hope all of you took a look at it when you walked in. Beautiful. They do a beautiful, beautiful job every month for us. Thanks to our food committees for putting together the delicious and diversified menus. Donna Unterman, who is chair of that committee, again, a marvel when it comes to these reservations. I don't know how she does it, but she manages to get the right number to report every month. Regardless of how many reservations we have, she seems to know how many cancellations we'll have as well. So thank you, Donna. Our program committee has once again created an excellent program for us. We're all looking forward to hearing our speaker's story today. The Judaica shop is bustling and has beautiful merchandise. I hope you take a moment to at least window shop. They have great, great merchandise now. They have new Hanukkah menorahs and Chanukias, beautiful new taliot. And the silver work now is by artist Michael Aram, if any of you are familiar with his work. There's also the hand-done Passover, the Seder plates, and other turntables by Sticks, which are gorgeous. Treat yourself to a visit to the shop. For your convenience, the shop will be open after today's meeting until the last buyer is done. Please stop in and look around. If you don't have to buy a gift for someone else, buy one for yourself. Hanukkah's coming up. Our Unique Boutique fundraiser will be in late April this year. It's April 27th and 28th, a Sunday and Monday. We have already made a great start on lining up outstanding vendors, and we will be sending that out in the early spring to let you know who some of these vendors are. If you go to any craft fairs and see a vendor that you think would be great, let us know. Contact Randy Jacobs. She is the chair. And so we can get in touch with the vendor and ask them if they would like to participate. Also, if you can contribute, you or your family, your husband, whatever, can contribute any goods or services to our auction, please contact Anita Sherman. She is chairman of the auction and the raffle. And we're trying to do something new this year. If any of you have a vacation home or a condo or tickets to events, series of a whole year, and are willing to contribute any of those to the auction, some days at the vacation home, one ticket out of a series, something like that, we would love that. Again, please contact Anita Sherman. If you don't have her contact information, you can speak to me or Gail. We will put you in touch with her. One of the things that everyone can do to help Sisterhood is to be a program sponsor, which means making a donation in honor of or in memory of someone or something, and then you have that donation announced at the next program. Bobby Selnick will read the sponsors for our meeting today.
Hi, everybody, and I'm reading these on behalf of myself and Gloria Luchinsky. Oh, there she is, Gloria Luchinsky. So we have a bunch today. Some are for happy, some are not happy. Randy Jacobs, I saw Randy somewhere, in honor of the first anniversary of Marin and Jason Fulton, her daughter and son-in-law, so mazel tov for 1 year. This one's from Renee King and Sandy Livingston. It's in honor of Marilyn Blum's birthday, which is today. I don't know where Marilyn Blum is, but happy birthday. Happy birthday, Marilyn. These are from, well, this is from the Bethel, a group I never heard of, Bethel Wise Aging Group. It's in memory of our Wise Aging Group member, Judy Pacino. As many of you know, Judy Pacino passed away, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't know. Freddie Silberman, in memory of past president Judy Pacino. Ellen Wiesenberger, in memory of Judy Pacino. Gloria, myself, I did one in memory of, she's a longtime member, past president, and my friend, Judy Pacino. Gloria Luchinsky, in memory of Judy Pacino, and wishing Sharon Dornfeld good health. So thank you for all that you contribute to sponsorship. The money goes right to Sisterhood. We don't take any credits for this. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to invite up Helen Friedman, Vice President.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll keep my report short. First is Meet the Authors Report, and you can find a flyer out in the lobby. And it says the cold weather is here. Our Meet the Authors Zoom programs are a great way to spend 1 hour, one evening a month from December through March, hearing from diverse authors who are handpicked by the committee. The first program in our series is 1 week from today on Monday, December 9th at 7:30 p.m. The author tells the true story of a Jewish mother of 4, a gracious society hostess, a beloved member of her community, and the first widely renowned crime boss in America. The title is The Talented Mrs. Mandelbaum, The Rise and Fall of American Organized Crime Boss. That sounds interesting. In January, we will hear another compelling author, Rossi. Her memoir, titled The Punk Rock Queen of the Jews, is her own story about rebelling against the norms of a traditional Jewish upbringing with punk rock and drugs, and what her parents did to her in a desperate attempt to set her straight. February's book is titled When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, and March is in the Shadow of the Greenbrier. Learn all about what inspires these authors, how they chose their subjects, and anything else that you want to know. These are not typical book reviews, and you don't have to have read the books ahead of time to enjoy the programs. You can sign up for all 4 Zoom sessions at a discount, or pick and choose from the list. This is all done at the time of registration. And as I said, there are flyers in the lobby. Remember, you can watch these programs from anywhere, so if you're away for the winter, you can still join us. Our Agus library has a copy of all 4 books in the series, and registration is now open, and there are no restrictions at all. Anybody can register, so please pass it along. Sisterhood Shabbat is Merle Intner and Barbara Green are the co-chairs, and we are proud to announce and remind everyone that the women of the Sisterhood will again conduct a Shabbat service at Bethel. Our next Sisterhood Shabbat will be held on Saturday, May 3rd, 2025. It is definitely a highlight of the Sisterhood year. It's a beautiful service, as many of you know, followed by a delicious Kiddush. We are continuing to sign up members for various parts of the service, both speaking and non-speaking. Please save the date on your calendars and join us on May 3rd for our very special event. And last but not least is the trip committee, and they have been very busy, and we've had many enjoyable trips already this year. We are excited for our last 2024 trip on December 10th right here in Baltimore. The trip is sold out, but don't let that stop you, because we always get cancellations, so feel free to get on the waiting list. And that's to the Enoch Pratt Library with lunch at Chiparelli's, and then a stop at the American Visionary Art Museum. And for 2025, we have Zoom trips that I'm about to mention can be watched from any location, and once again, these are also open to anyone, not just Bethel or Sisterhood members. On January 23rd at 11 a.m., we are excited to be going on a 1-hour guided Zoom trip to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and on February 19th at 11 a.m., we will explore Greece, also via a 1-hour guided Zoom. Continuing with our trip highlights, on April 6th, we will travel to New York City for a docent-led tour of the backstage of the Metropolitan Opera. And then we will go to the Center for Jewish Heritage to view a special, never-before-seen in the United States exhibit of Anne Frank. Dinner, of course, will be catered later by Ben's Deli. On May 6th, we will travel to Washington, D.C. for a house and garden tour of Marjorie Merriweather's home, Hillwood Mansion. We will also enjoy a delicious lunch on the grounds in their restaurant. As always, we hope you will join us for our trips. If you have any questions or trip suggestions, please contact Robin Kleiman or Sandra Cameron. We have a lot to look forward to this year. Thank you all.
Thank you, Helen. Now I'd like to call on Myra Coonan.
Good morning. It's good to see everyone. I'm reporting on JTS Torah Fund. That's the Jewish Theological Seminary where we educate future clergy, and all of our clergy were educated there. There's a table out in the lobby where Jane Crozen and Gail Sugarman are selling cards. $20 for 6 cards, and this year's theme is Em Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. So go check out the cards. They're for all occasions. I think you'll like them. And the Judaica shop, you've heard, will be open today, but their normal hours, their regular hours, are Monday through Friday, 12 to 2. The second Sunday of the month, 10:30 to 12:30. And prior to First Wednesdays, they're open 6:30 to 7:15. If those hours don't work for you and you need an appointment, you can contact Marcy Kaplan or Susan Goldshire, and they'll be happy to accommodate you. Thank you.
And now I would like to call upon Marcia Boonshaft.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to put on my social action hat first because you all are the most generous group I've ever seen. Today we had collections for the Winter Coat Drive, and I don't know if I want to steal Randy's thunder, but close to 300 coats over the 3 months that we collected. So give yourselves a hand. In addition, today we collected books and games and toys for the Crisis Center, and they will be delighted with all of your donations. For Hana, we've collected money in terms of cash or checks, and we will continue to collect both the games and toys and the checks through December 15th. So if you're writing a check for Hana, you can write it to Beth L. Social Action with Hana on the line. So thank you. Couldn't do it without you. For my committees, the first one I'd like to notate is Nina Rosenzweig will be leading the book review for Kelly Rimmer's The German Wife. Given the dual timeline, multi-character perspective of Sophie in Berlin and Lizzie in the United States, both main characters have been shaped and changed by war and hardship. This collision of personal history and misunderstanding brings a rich plot of controversy and heartache. The story explores themes of prejudice and hatred, accountability and absolution, as well as the cost of sacrifice. It was an absolutely riveting read from the first to the last page. The book review will be Wednesday, December 11th at 12:15. Bring your dairy lunch. Drinks will be provided. Please RSVP to Nina Rosenzweig, and there is a brochure out in front. Next item is exciting also. Game Day Spring 2025. Another great game day is on the way. Mark your calendars. Enjoy a delicious lunch and play your favorite games with your friends. Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, noon to 3:30. The cost will be $45. Look for more information as we get into 2025. And then the last item I'd like to bring to your attention is the next Federation of Jewish Women's Organization meeting is on Thursday, January 23rd on Zoom. The speaker is Nitzana Darshan Leitner from the Israel Law Center, who will speak. Her topic is Lawfare and Warfare, Finding Justice for Victims of Terror. Thank you all, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you all to our wonderful vice presidents. Some important announcements today. The next general meeting will take place on January 6th when our speaker will be Lee Gordon, and this will be January 6th, 2025. This is the only general meeting this year when our speaker will be addressing us via Zoom. We will be here in person and we will be able to ask questions, but you will see Lee on the big screen on the stage. Over 25 years ago, Lee Gordon and his friend Amin Kahalaf had a vision to create a Jewish Arab school. They co-founded, hand in hand, the Center for Jewish Arab Education in Israel. They currently have 6 schools and communities throughout Israel, and the mission is to create a network of integrated bilingual schools for Jewish and Arab students. They believe that partnership is the only way forward. Learn how they are coping during this turbulent time in Israel's history. The deadline to register for this is December 20th. That's Friday, just before the holidays. And remember, the waiting list, the deadline does not guarantee you a seat, and we might sell out before then. Christmas and Hanukkah week, we'll be unable to retrieve the mail, so please make your checks online, reservations, and reach the office by December 20th. You can register for virtual up until Friday, January 3rd. On December 14th at 8 o'clock in the Offutt Auditorium right here, we will have Sonia Disappear, Fear, live in concert. Join us for an unforgettable night of music and fun at Bethel. With Sonia Disappear, Fear, live in concert, an independent singer-songwriter, Sonia Rothstein is loved for her beautiful voice and songs that illuminate truth passionately delivered. Sonia is a Baltimore native who has performed around the world. Tickets are in $30 in advance and $35 at the door. For more information, there should be a flyer in the lobby, or you may ask in the office. Any checks that you submit should be made out to Bethel Sisterhood, not Bethel Congregation, since we have separate accounts. Our raffle drawing for door prizes will be held at the conclusion of the program, so please stay for that, and there'll be people walking around during lunch. I'd like to call on Marilyn Dubin to lead us in prayer and the Hamotzi.
Oh, okay. Y'all can all hear me. As you know, Hanukkah and Christmas are the same day this year, and even though this is early, this is a prayer for Hanukkah. And I hope it gives you some things to think about. Hanukkah prayer for freedom. Source of creation and life of the universe, soon we will gather together on Hanukkah as Jews of conscience with a deep spiritual bond to the lights of freedom. We are grateful for the inner might of the Maccabees who fought to reclaim a Jerusalem in despair and rekindle the lights of human freedom. Freedom has many faces. Freedom from war and conflict or threats of terror, freedom to have a secure home, freedom from hunger, poverty, and despair. Freedom is deeply personal as well. Freedom to express one's gender, identify without fear, freedom to express one's racial identity without fear, freedom to make choices about our lives and deepest beliefs, freedom to live our faith in all of its beauty without negating anyone else's. Our Hanukkah menorah with its 8 branches reminds us of the diversity on our earth, bound together with the branch of oneness. All right. Reminds us that we are interconnected as a global community. At times of deep darkness, instead of walking in fear, let us kindle godly lights, lights within and lights beyond, and let us increase these lights each day to light the way for all. And let us say amen. And now we're going to, everybody can get a piece of challah. We're going to do the motzi. Y'all have it? Oh, okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min ha'oretz.
All right, ladies, we are used to our routine of how we do this. A and B tables are by the kitchen, and C and D tables are by the window. Please, when you hear your number called, go immediately to the table. Kitchen side, KA, table 3. Window side, table 4 to the C table. Kitchen side, table 26 to the B table. And table 25 goes to the window side D. A. The people on the window side, 4 and 25. 25 is going to D, and 4 is going to C. 3 and 26. 3 is going to A, and 26 is at B. Table 8 is going to the window side C. Table 12, window side D. Table 12. Table 6 is going to table A. Kitchen side. Table 20, you are going to B, table B on the kitchen side. Window side, table 5. Table 5, you're going to table C, and table 23, you're going to the window side, table D. 23, table D on the window side. Table 13, kitchen side, table A. Table 23, you were called for table D. Table 19, you're going to the kitchen side, B. Table 2. Ooh. Table A on the kitchen side. Table 2, you've been called. Table 24, window side, table D. Robin, your table's been called. Your table's been called.
I'm still waiting for my speaker.
Okay.
I will not start.
No, I'm just worried about, the. Table 7, kitchen side, table A. Table 7, kitchen side, table A. Window side, table 9 goes to C. Table 18, kitchen side, you go to table B. Table 18. Table 10, you go to C of the window. Table 10. Window side 10. Table C. C. Table 10 goes to window side. They're screwed up. Yeah, well, we had a problem. Table 11, window side D. Table 15, kitchen side B. 15, kitchen side B. Table 8, kitchen side A. Table 8, you've been called. Table 17, window side table C. 17, window side C. Excuse me, you all. You are blocked. Can you all just move a little bit? I can't see. Table 1, kitchen side A. Table 1, kitchen side A. Table 16, window side C. Table 14, kitchen side B. Table 21, go to the kitchen side A because they're empty. 21, go to A. And table 22, table 22 is going to go to table D by the window. D. All tables should have been called.
I don't like when this is just, whoops, I shouldn't say that. Oh, even in. That's a good idea.
Remember that table B has, if you want more, you may go to table B to get a second helping.
Ladies, Harriet Cohn is selling raffles. If you want raffles for the door prize at the end of the meeting today, raise your hand, keep it up. Harriet is walking around. She will get to you, okay? Also, Ellen Cohn, is Ellen Cohn here today? If you are, put your hand up, please. Okay, thank you. Betsy Narrow and the Beer Cut Group. Coming up? Okay.
All right, I'm gonna have some, I will. Somebody is gonna have to hold that for me. Hello, everyone, I am here. And we are all here. My goal is to have all of you up here leading, and I'll be back there doing my part as a responder. All right, one of you has to hold this for me. You want me to hold it for you? You can do your own. Look on up with me. All right, this is the beer cot, which means we're thanking God for everything that He has done for us, especially this beautiful meal. Are we ready? Oh, good. I love it. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, wait a minute, Sharon here.
Okay. Sing loud, ladies. Have Rai Nivarech. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Miata V'Yad Olam. Bershut Chaverai Nivarech Eloheinu Shelchanu Mishalo. Eloheinu Shelchanu Mishalo. Uvtuvo. Baruch Eloheinu Shelchanu Mishalo. Uvtuvo Chayinu. Baruch Uvaruch Shemo. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hazan et ha'olam kulo b'tuvo, b'chein v'chesed u'vrachamim, rachamim, hu notein lechem l'chol basor, ki li'olam chasto, ki li'olam chasto, uv'tuvo hagadol. Tamid lo chasar lanu, v'al yachsar lanu, ma'azon li'olam va'ed, ba'avor shemo hagadol. Ki oel zonu varnes lakol, u'meitin mazon, lechol briotav, asher bara, Baruch atah Adonai, Hazan et hakol. Praise be God, of whose bounty we have partaken, and through whose goodness we live. Praised are you, our God, who provides food for all. We are grateful for your gift of Torah, enriching the minds and souls of our people. Adonai, our God, bless all assembled at these tables. Bless all who are rebuilding Zion so that your word may again go forth from Jerusalem. Bless all who help to bring forth justice and peace in the world. Kakatu v'yachalta v'savata uvarachta et Adonai Elohecha aha'aretz hatova asher natan lach Baruch atah Adonai aha'aretz v'al hamazon Uvnei Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh Bimheira v'yameinu Bimheira v'yameinu Uvnei Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh Bimheira v'yameinu Baruch atah Adonai Boneh v'rachamav Yerushalayim Amen. Hum if you don't know the words. It's okay. I'll take it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Ho'el Avinu Malkeinu Adireinu Boreinu Go Aleinu Yotzreinu Kadoshenu Kadosh Yaakov Ro'enu Ro'e Yisrael HaMelech HaTov HaMeitiv Lakol Shebecho Yom V'yom Hu Heitiv Hu Meitiv Hu Yetiv Lanu Oseh Shalom Bimromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imaru Amen. Adonai Oz Li'amo Yitain Adonai Yevorech Et Amo V'Shalom. Everybody, the last line is in English, our native language. May God give strength to our people and bless us all with peace. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. I do too. I want to tell you how proud I am of you. I am. Thanks.
Sweetheart. I'm here because I'm the Uber driver for Jeff. He's my first cousin. So, good to see you. Salute. I miss you too. Tell me I said. I would love to. Oh, great. Keep moving, girlfriend.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? Shh. Can you hear me? In the back? Great. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker to you, Jeffrey Kluger. Although Jeffrey currently calls New York City home, he was born right here in Baltimore. He attended Pikesville High School, class of '72. Raise your hand if you graduated with him, or ahead of him or behind him. And he went on to graduate with a degree in political science from University of Maryland. University of Baltimore Law School was his next stop, and although he is a licensed attorney, Jeffrey's real dream was to move to New York and become a journalist. Throughout his life, his passion has been all things science. Somehow, Jeffrey has been able to pull it all together and make it happen. He did move to New York, he is a journalist, and he writes about science, including topics on space, health, human behavior, and climate. After working as a staff writer for Discover magazine for almost 10 years and writing for other publications, including the New York Times, Family Circle, and Science Digest, Jeffrey started working at Time magazine in 1996. In 1998, he became a senior writer specializing in science and technology, and in 2014, he became an editor at large. He is the author or co-author of over 40 cover stories. Jeffrey is also the author of 13 books. He co-authored the book Apollo 13 with the astronaut Jim Lovell. The 1995 film starring Tom Hanks was based on that book. We're going to learn many more interesting things about Jeffrey during the course of his talk, but one standout to me was that he can identify the moment when he began his love of all things cosmic. He was the tender age of 3.5. I think that I'll let him describe that moment. Please welcome our guest, Jeffrey Kluger.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope my mic is on. Let me boot up my keyboard. This will take one moment. So thank you all for having me here today to be around people I have known for years and people I haven't known for years, but in whose company and in whose community I have moved for all of my life is very gratifying. I want to start by that early experience, the early experience that we spoke about when I was 3.5 years old. It takes a long time before the cloud banks of our earliest memories start to part and to clear. It's not until we're in pre-K that the regions of the brain responsible for long-term recall begin coming online. Even then, the recollections that are stored there tend to float and to drift, unmoored from any connection to the calendar. I have scraps of memories from long ago, birthdays, Hanukkahs, trips to amusement parks. But was I 2 years old when those events took place? 3 years old? 4? I can't know. The earliest memory to which I can firmly affix a date, however, is an exceedingly vivid one. It was October 4th, 1957, specifically the evening of October 4th, 1957, when I was just 3.5 years old. Our family had dinner at our usual hour that night, but afterwards, my parents put my 2 younger brothers to sleep and bundled my older brother and me into our jackets and steered us out to the front lawn of our home in Northwest Baltimore. I don't recall my parents telling us why we were there. I don't remember any conversation at all. but somehow we knew. There had been chatter. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought I wasn't in the mic. There had been chatter among the adults for much of the day that something epical had just happened, and that something was up in the sky, far higher in the sky than human beings or their ingenious machines had ever gone before. We looked up wordlessly, scanning for something crossing the heavens from west to east, to which we hoped to bear historical witness. We were by no means alone that night. All over the city, all over the country, all over continents, all over the world at large, other families were gathering on lawns and in parks and in public gardens, craning their necks upward just as we were, and well they might. Earlier that day, word had come out from Central Asia that at a shadowy rocket base known as the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, the much-feared Soviet Union had rolled one of its much-feared R-7 intercontinental ballistic missiles out to a launch pad, topped it with a 23-inch, 184-pound spacecraft called Sputnik, and hurled it into an elliptical orbit around the Earth with a perigee, or a low point, of 134 miles, and an apogee, or high point, of a staggering 583 miles. For 4.5 billion years, our planet had had just one moon. And now, with the single turn of a calendar page, it had a second, albeit artificial one. The Soviet achievement fascinated and terrified the US in equal measure. Russian satellites sighted over SF, read the San Francisco Chronicle. Satellite fired by Russia circling US 15 times a day, read the Cleveland Plain Dealer in something of a frightened crouch. US views satellite as Russian victory, read the New York Herald Tribune. I was too young to understand the geopolitical implications of the achievement. I was too young to understand apogees or perigees or ICBMs or orbital physics. I knew only one thing with a clear, bright, near-drunken certainty. Spaceships, which had always been the stuff of picture books and cartoons, were now the stuff of fact. And the one in the skies this evening could be passing over my very home. We never saw Sputnik that night, but that was not because my brother and I didn't plead to stay outside until sunup if we had to, until at last the satellite barnstormed our home on Berkeley Avenue. Finally, a little commuter plane with flashing wingtip lights did fly by, and we... I do have a body mic on. Okay. Oh, okay. Better? Oh, much better. Finally, a little commuter plane with flashing wingtip lights did fly by, and we asked our parents excitedly if that was the spacecraft. Yes, they told us in all solemnity. Yes, it is. That night, a hinge turned for me. I was like the duckling or gosling that hatches from its egg and imprints on the first thing it sees. If that thing is its mother, it will follow her anywhere. If it's a farm girl, she will be the object of his adoration. If it's a big bird plush toy, the little hatchling will never leave its side. I was that hatchling. Space was my love object, and my thoughts and games and toys and passions would never stray far from it. 4 years later, when I was just shy of 7 years old, the Soviets would again make cosmic history, launching Air Force Commander Yuri Gagarin on a single orbit around the Earth, making him the first human being in space. That flight, like Sputnik, was shrouded in secrecy until it had been executed successfully and could be reported as an ex post facto triumph. Less than a month later, America's Alan Shepard would follow Gagarin aloft, managing only a 15-minute pop gun suborbital that Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, described as, quote, a flea hop, close quote. Nonetheless, Shepard had gotten America into the space game, and unlike the Soviets, had broadcast every instant of the mission on live television. I devoured the coverage and was back in front of the TV again in July when Gus Grissom repeated Shepard's feat, and yet again on February 20th, 1962, when John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, and my second grade class joined the student body watching the coverage on a single TV in the Park school cafeteria. What I didn't watch, what no TV audience watched because it was not broadcast live, was the speech that President John Kennedy delivered to a joint session of Congress on May 25th, 1961, after Gagarin's and Shepard's flights, but before Grissom's and Glenn's. Kennedy had called the lawmakers together to muster support for a sprawling spending bill that he was proposing, one that would cost the country $1.8 billion, pushing the fiscal 1961 deficit to a jaw-dropping $3.5 billion. There was a lot to like in Kennedy's federal shopping spree. An increase in foreign aid, funding for the Army and Marine Corps, support for the Small Business Administration, expanded retraining for unemployed workers, a bump in civil defense mobilization, and on in a bank-busting wish list. And then, too, there was the matter of the moon, something the young president kept for the end of his speech, lest he make his flat-out gobsmacking proposal too early in his prepared remarks and risk the 535 senators and representatives not paying a lick of attention to anything else he said after that. When he did mention the moon, he came at it slowly, even sideways, arguing the case before actually laying it out. Quote, "Finally," he said, "the dramatic achievements in space which have occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to all of us, as did the Sputnik in 1957, that now is the time to take longer strides, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. Therefore," he paused, "I believe this nation should commit itself, before this decade is out, to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth." The legislators were not amused. A lunar landing just 9 years away was so improbable, so outrageous, so outside the scope of anything the newly established National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, had ever attempted, it was hard to believe the president had said it at all. Quote, "This is the worst shock I have ever heard over anything in my 15 years in Congress," Otto E. Passman, a Democratic representative from Louisiana, told the New York Times. Republican Senator Prescott Bush from Connecticut warned that the spending necessary to make Kennedy's fever dream of a lunar landing a reality would, quote, "unleash the forces of inflation," and chided the young commander-in-chief for making proposals and, quote, "refusing to recommend the taxes to pay for them." Yes. Better? I am so sorry. I usually am better with voice management. I adore the sound of my own voice so much. I usually take better care of it. And Kennedy wasn't even telling the whole truth. Never mind landing on the moon before the end of the decade. The secret goal was to do so in 1967, poking a finger in the eye of the Soviet Union on the 50th anniversary of their beloved revolution. Before Kennedy's address was delivered, presidential speechwriter Ted Sorensen sent it on to NASA Administrator Jim Webb for vetting, with the 1967 target date included. Webb turned thumbs down. There were simply too many uncertainties, too many technical hurdles to overcome to guarantee sticking a lunar landing within 6 years. Well, Sorensen asked, what do you want me to put in, Jim? Well, why don't we put in within the decade, Webb answered. So that's how the speech read, and that's how Kennedy delivered it. But Washington being Washington and reporters being reporters, the news leaked. And in the next day's edition of the New York Times, which dutifully reported Kennedy's end of the decade pledge, a companion article ran with the headline, quote, a three-man trip to the moon by 1967, projected by White House aides. We didn't get the Times in our Baltimore home, favoring the morning sun, of course. But the story of 1967 broke wide and it broke fast. And it was impossible for a space-crazy 7-year-old like myself not to hear all of the talk about what was already being called a space race with the Soviets, with the two great superpowers in a bipolar world war facing off for supremacy in the skies. For my demographic, for our demographic, this flung open the doors to imagination run riot. The generation that preceded us, the one that would eventually be given the historical honorific, the greatest generation, had played for mortal stakes, facing off against fascism in Europe, imperialism in the Pacific, and a global depression that threatened the very survival of capitalism. They bequeathed us a prosperous world at relative peace. But in that blessing, there was also a burden. What could post-war America achieve that was remotely as worthy, remotely as bracing as the accomplishments of the decades just past? The answer was space. In rapid, happy succession, the US and the USSR trained up a corps of impossibly gifted, impossibly courageous, impossibly glamorous young men, loaded them into spacecraft with exotic names like Mercury and Vostok and Gemini and Vashkad and Apollo and Soyuz, and sent them off to do peaceable, bloodless combat in the skies. For every Gus Grissom, there was a German Titov. For every John Glenn, a Pavel Popovich. America's Gordon Cooper spent a full day and a half in space, so Russia's Andrei Nikolaev spent 4 days. Vostok 3 and 4 were launched on a joint mission marking the first time two manned spacecraft had been in orbit at the same time, so Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 were sent aloft to match them. The Soviets continued to fly in secrecy. The Americans, in keeping with the country's yee-haw, high-stakes cowboy culture, flooded the zone, providing saturation coverage of the countdown, the liftoff, the hours or even days in orbit, and the white-knuckle splashdown. For school children, this meant a thrilling drill. Coming to class in the morning and seeing a television that had been rolled into the classroom atop a metal cart, the unmistakable sign that the day's lessons would be suspended in favor of the real-world drama of another astronaut crew undertaking another mortal mission. Following the men's exploits was not just a way of keeping abreast of current events. It was nothing short of a patriotic act. It was on those rabbit-ear TVs that we watched Grissom and John Young take off on the first two-man Gemini mission in 1965, and watched Ed White and Jim McDivitt pull off the first American spacewalk 2 months later. It was on those TVs, too, that we watched as rookie astronauts Neil Armstrong and Dave Scott nearly perished in orbit when their Gemini 8 spacecraft spun out of control, tumbling at nearly 1 revolution per second and pitching both astronauts into the near unconsciousness of vertigo. Ultimately, Armstrong would stabilize his spacecraft, but the 2 astronauts, who were supposed to remain aloft for nearly 4 days, would be forced to hightail it home after just 10 hours. In Washington, President Lyndon Johnson issued a statement praising the astronauts and pledging that America would, quote, still land the first man on the surface of the moon in the decade of the 60s. And for the next 10 months, it looked like Johnson would make good on that promise, as Geminis 9, 10, 11, and 12 went successfully aloft in rapid succession, as the black and white TVs were rolled into and out of the classrooms again and again, and as the US assumed mastery in space, while the feared Soviets struggled to get their next generation Soyuz spacecraft off the ground. And then, on a Friday night in 1967, it all nearly came to ruin. That evening, Armstrong, along with astronauts Gordon Cooper, Dick Gordon, and Jim Lovell, were in the East Room of the White House, representing NASA at a reception marking the signing of an international accord officially known by the gobbledygook name, quote, the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, and more straightforwardly called the Outer Space Treaty. Whatever its name, the agreement bound those 3 signatory nations and any other countries that later joined to keeping space forever demilitarized, to permitting all nations to explore it in peace, to be liable for any damage caused by any objects they might launch, and to treat all astronauts and cosmonauts as emissaries of humankind, to be rescued and restored to their parent states if they should ever become lost or stranded. It was a happy event, a hopeful event, and for the US, one made even happier and more hopeful by the fact that at the very moment the reception was taking place, astronauts Grissom and White, along with rookie astronaut Roger Chaffee, were hard at work at Cape Kennedy, running through a countdown dress rehearsal inside their Apollo 1 spacecraft in preparation for the maiden mission of the 3-man moonship less than 3 weeks later. Grissom, White, and Chaffee climbed into their cockpit at just after 1 p.m. that day. But what they could not know, what no one at the Space Center or the White House or the nation at large could know, was that they would never climb out again. Like tens of millions of other Americans, I was watching TV early that evening, and like tens of millions of others too, I sat bolt upright when the programming was interrupted by a network bulletin announcing the grim news from NASA, the news that at 6:31 p.m., a flash fire had broken out inside the sealed spacecraft, sparked by a stray wire that had been rubbed raw by a metal door of a small storage compartment, and fueled by the high-pressure, 100% oxygen atmosphere inside the spacecraft. That combination made the Apollo nothing short of a cocked bomb, one that, once triggered, would kill the crew in less than 20 seconds, subjecting them to flames that reached 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, or twice the melting point of lead. Late that night, the remains of the 3 men were carefully removed from the ruined spacecraft. 2 days later, Grissom and Chaffee would be ceremonially laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia, and white would be interned on the grounds of his beloved West Point in upstate New York. The Apollo program turned instantly to ash. Less than 3 years remained before President Kennedy's pledge to have astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade, and at the moment, the space agency that was supposed to make that happen had blood on its hands. It would be 20 months before Americans would make it to space again. 20 months during which NASA and its surviving astronaut corps would pour themselves into redesigning, rebuilding, recommissioning the sloppily, hurriedly built Apollo, turning it into something that, like the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft before it, would be fit to fly. Astronaut Wally Schirra, who inherited Grissom's role as the commander of the first Apollo mission and was tapped as the point man for the astronauts on the factory floor of North American Aviation, the prime contractor for the spacecraft, made it clear to the assembly line teams that there would be no more shabby work done while he was on the job. I asked him once about how he dealt with the factory workers. The words he told me were chilling. "You roasted 3 of my friends in that thing," he would growl at them when something was not to his liking. "You're not going to roast me." It would not be until October 11th, 1968, that Schirra and his Apollo 7 crew would at last make it to Earth orbit. On the other side of the world, the Soyuz 3 spacecraft would take to the skies in the same month. Soyuz 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 would follow in rapid succession, all of them flying successfully, but all of them, like Apollo 7, venturing no further than a dog paddle in low Earth orbit. Then, 10 weeks after Apollo 7 flew, all of that changed. On December 21st, 1968, veteran astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell and rookie astronaut Bill Anders took off aboard their Apollo 8 spacecraft, successfully making it to Earth orbit like all of the other crews before them. And then, like no crew, American or Soviet, had ever even attempted before, they fired the upper stage of their Saturn V moon rocket, increasing their speed from the 17,500 miles per hour necessary to maintain Earth orbit to the 25,000 miles per hour necessary to tear themselves away from Earth's gravity and head out for the moon. 3 days later, on Christmas Eve, 1968, they reached the moon, fired the smaller engine of their Apollo mothership, and entered lunar orbit. It was the end of an ugly, bloody, riven year, a year that saw the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, that saw the Tet Offensive in Vietnam, the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, and riots in cities across the US, including at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. But it was a year that ended in verse. It ended in rapture. It ended with Borman, Lovell, and Anders pointing their television camera through the window of their Apollo spacecraft toward the ancient, modeled, 4.5 billion-year-old surface of the moon 60 miles below them, and reading from the book of Genesis, which told the tale of the creation of the heavens and the earth and the firmament. Borman, the commander, ended with his own thoughts, signing off with the words, "And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth." I was 14 years old, just old enough to be cynical, just young enough to be distractible. But I experienced neither cynicism nor distraction. I experienced instead joy and uplift and wonder. Humans had gone to the moon. American humans had gone to the moon. True, they had not yet closed that final 60 miles, descending from orbit and touching the surface and stirring the powdery soil. But Borman, Lovell, and Anders, 3 creatures of the earth, had become, if only for a day, creatures of the moon. In the days just following Apollo 8, NASA announced that Apollo 11, with Armstrong, Mike Collins, and Buzz Aldrin aboard, would return to the moon in July and cross that last 6 miles. At that news, I was crestfallen. July was summer. For me, summer meant camp. And with men from the Earth heading back to the moon, the place I felt I needed to be during that epic journey was in front of my family's color TV from the first moment of liftoff to the last moment of splashdown. Not crowded with 200 other boys in a gymnasium-sized rec hall around the single black and white TV the camp owned, assuming the camp directors even allowed us to watch the coverage at all. But I was wrong. The first moonwalk was not a thing to be experienced alone, but a thing to be experienced collectively, communally, socially, a thing to be cheered as one, beheld as one, gasped at and whooped at as one. The camp did provide us with a TV, and all 200 of us bent forward when Armstrong descended the lunar module ladder. All 200 of us fell silent as he spoke of his one small step. All 200 of us leapt and stomped and cheered and hugged when the boot prints had been pressed, when the grand deed had been done. Around the world, in nations that loved America, and nations that hated America, and nations that, like so many, had ambivalent feelings for America, that scene was repeated, because Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins did not make their journey as representatives of a nation that had come into existence just 200 years before, but as representatives of a species that first walked the planet 200,000 years ago, a species that could once barely leave the savannah and had now left its very world. Apollo 12 would follow that fall, touching down in the ocean of storms and bringing not just skill and will and steely courage to the moon, but exuberance as well. Armstrong spoke 11 sober words upon stepping on the lunar surface, and they were words spoken for the ages. Apollo 12 Commander Pete Conrad spoke just one word, and that word, and I'm quoting here, was whoopee. I followed every moment of Apollo 12's journey, just as I had followed every moment of Apollo 11. But the truth was, I was already looking forward to Apollo 13, set to take off for the moon's Fra Mauro highlands in April of 1970. For me, the sublime appeal of that mission was not just where the crew was going, heading for the rugged lunar terrain that Apollos 11 and 12 had not dared attempt, but for who that crew would be. Apollo 13 included 2 rookies in the center and right-hand seats, Jack Swigert and Fred Hayes. But for the left-hand seat, the commander's seat, NASA tapped Jim Lovell, a man who, to my way of thinking, was the finest flyer ever to strap into a spacecraft. Anyone could pick the likes of Armstrong or Aldrin or John Glenn to be their favorite astronaut, but you had to be a connoisseur to pick Lovell. In 1965, Lovell had been in the right-hand seat of Gemini 7 when it made its historic rendezvous with Gemini 6. In 1966, he had commanded the capstone mission of the Gemini program, Gemini 12, along with Aldrin. In 1968, he had made the Christmas Eve flight to the moon aboard Apollo 8. Now he would be going back to the moon, the first human being to travel there twice, to leave his boot prints in the ancient soil. But history would have other plans for Jim Lovell. History would give Jim a broken spacecraft with a bulky oxygen tank. History would give him 2 uneventful days in space, followed by a sudden explosion in the aft end of his ship when he and Swigert and Hayes were 200,000 miles from home. History would give him a 6-day drama that the world would watch unfold as the men in mission control and the ones in the spacecraft would fight to wring every bit of power and oxygen and water and warmth from the command module and the lifeboat lunar module and bring the crew home at last to an improbable splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, capping a mission that had gone from one of high adventure to one of pure survival, a triumph of invention and improvisation and no small amount of sheer dumb luck. And then history would turn its back on the crew. NASA would suss out the cause of the Apollo 13 explosion, tracing the accident to another raw wire in a broken motor in a tank of flammable liquid oxygen, and would ensure that none of the other lunar missions flew again with such a potentially fatal flaw. Apollo 14 would stick the landing in the Fra Mauro highlands that had been intended for Apollo 13. Apollos 15, 16, and 17 would make their own grand landings at the Hadley Apennine Mountains, the Descartes Highlands, and the Taurus Littrow Mountains. 24 men would fly on the 9 missions the United States would make to the moon from 1968 to 1972, but only 12 of them would walk on the lunar surface. And Jim Lovell, NASA royalty, would not be among them. At the same time Jim was leaving the worlds of science and exploration in 1974, going to work in the private sector for an early wireless communications company, I was finding my circuitous way into journalism. Like so many young people in the white-hot ideological 1970s, I saw a future for myself in politics. I studied political science at the University of Maryland, College Park, and later matriculated at the University of Baltimore School of Law. My undergraduate work was fine. My law school career was suboptimal. I found contract law grueling, property law unbearable, civil procedure a hopeless muddle. I quite loved constitutional and criminal law, but could not see myself pursuing a career either as a prosecutor or a public defender. I was idling in law school, wholly uncertain of what to do when my 3-year interregnum there was up. Then, one afternoon, after my first year as a law student, a bright little light went on for me. I had always fancied myself a good self-taught journalist, specifically a good self-taught satirist. And I sat down that day to write 3 freelance submissions to the National Lampoon, the leading satirical publication of its time. I will never know if any of the stories were any good. Certainly, the Lampoon didn't think so, judging by the silence that greeted my submissions. But I knew one thing with clarity and certainty. In the brief 2 hours I had been writing the pieces, I had been more gratified, more filled up, more suffused with happy energy than I had in my entire year I had spent as a freshman law student. At that moment, on that day, June 15, 1977, I made a decision. I would finish my next 2 years in law school, but the moment I was done, I would pack my belongings into a U-Haul van, point its nose northward, and relocate to Manhattan, where I would pursue a career in journalism. Just 2 years later, on Thursday, May 31st, 1979, I made good on that promise to myself. By September, I had my first job in journalism, working for the Soho Weekly News, an arts newspaper. But my true strength was not in arts journalism. It was, I soon realized, in science journalism, and I came to the field at just the right time. The late 1970s and early 1980s saw a Darwinian explosion of science publications. Scientific American, Science Digest, Omni, Discover, Science 81, Longevity, not to mention the weekly science sections in the New York Times and other publications. I felt, well suited to the work. I had a layperson's fascination with science, but I did not have a science degree, which I took to be a paradoxical plus. Without a formal grounding in any scientific field, I would never presume on the part of my reader a knowledge that I myself did not have, which meant I would never forget to ask the elementary question, the one that would make an abstruse topic comprehensible and, if I worked it just right, even lyrical to the audience. I adored every little thing about science journalism and still do. I spent 3 years as a senior editor and writer at Science Digest, 14 months as health editor at Family Circle magazine, and 4.5 years as a senior editor at Discover. But then, in 1991, Discover briefly went out of business, leaving the entire staff effectively on the curb. Only a few weeks would elapse before the Disney company would buy the magazine and re-employ us, but we had no way of knowing that that rescue was coming. It was Samuel Johnson who once said that the prospect of being hanged in a fortnight focuses the mind splendidly. And the same is true of the prospect of being unemployed. I quickly began mailing out resumes to headhunters at magazines, and at the same time, I decided to explore the idea of writing a book. I knew from the moment the thought occurred to me that what I wanted that book to be about was Apollo 13. The story had everything: mortal stakes, high adventure, compelling science, heroic figures, and best of all, it had unfolded only 21 years before, meaning that nearly all of the key players were still alive, and many of them were still working at NASA. This was in the days when email was years over the technological horizon, so I had to rely on NASA to give me Jim Lovell's physical mail address at the Centel Communications Company. I wrote to Jim asking him if he would be willing to be interviewed for a book on Apollo 13, and less than a week later, I got a letter back. It was in a thin envelope, and as we all remember from applying to colleges, thin envelopes are bad news. It's thick envelopes that are good news. This letter, however, broke that rule. Jim informed me that he was preparing to retire from Centel and had been thinking of writing a book on Apollo 13 himself. Perhaps we could collaborate, he suggested. Yes, I thought. Perhaps we could. Even before writing Jim back and agreeing to his wonderful idea, I allowed myself a bit of authorial vanity, contemplating whose name would go first in our eventual byline. Kluger comes before Lovell in the alphabet, after all. And realistically, I would be doing most of the actual hands-on writing, so it would be only natural for me to get top billing. Then I stopped myself and cast my mind back to 1970. Jim Lovell went to the moon that year. I went to 10th grade. That was the last time I gave the matter of the byline any thought at all. Jim and I spent the better part of 2 years writing our book, but long before it was finished, when we had written just a single chapter and an outline, Jim's agent submitted it to Ron Howard's Imagine Entertainment. As sweet serendipity would have it, the material landed on the desk of a producer named Michael Bostic, the son of a man named Jerry Bostic, who had been a flight dynamics officer in mission control during the Gemini and Apollo programs. Michael grew up on the Apollo missions and championed the book as a natural source material for a movie. Ron Howard and Tom Hanks, both children of the 1960s and 70s like me, and both space geeks like me, agreed. With that, an adventure I had begun on my front lawn in the fall of 1957 came back to inscribe a rich and perfect circle when I lived to see my book become a successful motion picture. I would continue on that journey, finding my way to Time magazine and writing a dozen more books, many of them about space. America as a whole, humanity as a whole, took a much, much grander journey than I had, growing from a civilization shackled to a single planet to one that could truly call two worlds home. I certainly didn't fly those missions. I certainly could not claim to have contributed to them in any way. But I have had the rare good fortune to be one of the people who helped tell their stories. It is a privilege for which I will always be profoundly grateful. Thank you.
We would like to ask some questions.
Sure.
Are we starting?
Does anybody have any questions for Jeffrey about anything science or growing up here?
Jeffrey, could you tell us about meeting Tom Hanks?
Meeting Tom Hanks was an extraordinary experience. I learned a valuable lesson about Hollywood, which is that if you are the writer, you are just one step behind the caterer on the set. Nobody pays attention to you. I didn't find out Tom Hanks had agreed to appear in the film until one of my brothers was on his elliptical machine at his gym, and he read the story in the Hollywood Reporter. He called me and said, you know, Tom Hanks is making your movie. I said, it would be nice if somebody told me Tom Hanks was making my movie. I came back to my office later that day, and there was a voicemail on my office phone. Somebody had given Tom a copy of the unpublished manuscript, which he was doing preliminary reading on. And I beeped into my voicemail, heard a very familiar voice, and the voice said, hello, Jeffrey Kluger, this is Tom Hanks, I'm an actor. And I thought, no, you're Tom Hanks, the podiatrist. I know who you are. He said, I am reading your manuscript, and I realize I'm doing it without your permission, but I would love to meet with you and have coffee and talk about it. Now, it did teach me something about Tom, something that I incorporated into a much later book I wrote, 15, 20 years later, on narcissism, with Tom as the inverse example of what a narcissist is. There are holes in my cultural awareness. I did not know Channing Tatum was a man until I saw him on the 2012 Academy Awards. I heard the name Channing Tatum. I thought, kind of a mashup between Carol Channing and Tatum O'Neal, right? He's either a young woman or an old woman. He appeared on the Academy Awards. I turned to one of my daughters and said, he's a man? I had no idea. So there are holes in my cultural understanding. So Tom was very humble. I met him at a restaurant. We spent many hours there talking. I showed him, I brought a lot of NASA pictures with me, and there was one shot of Jim in a flight suit with just this swashbuckling astronaut's hair. He looked like Kevin Costner, only Kevin Costner's way more charismatic brother. Tom looked at the picture, kind of sighed, looked in a mirror in the wall and said, well, I suppose I can fix the hair a little bit. He's going to be so disappointed when he meets me. But Tom was deferential to Jim. And this is something else I found, which is that all of the people in Hollywood whom I met approached astronauts as people who were of an entirely different celestial plane from the rest of us. In some ways they were literally, in some ways they were metaphorically. But when you speak to people who can speak about the moon in the first person singular and talk about when they were there, that was a brotherhood of 24 people, and that brotherhood is down to about 6 people. When Jim was later in his retirement, he and Marilyn, his wife of 71 years, were planning on a vacation, and Jim said, I don't know where to go. I've been to Europe, I've been to Africa, I've been to Antarctica, I've been to the moon twice. Where do we go? I said, Jim, that's a good problem to have, babe. But Tom and Jim were very similar people, not taken with themselves, warm men, genuine men, and men who simply were there to do good work and give back to the world. And it's one of the reasons I love them both. Yes.
Were you pleased with the outcome of the movie? Since you wrote the source material, were they accurate? Were you there for input, or did they ask you for any kind of input for details?
They did. I was signed on as a consultant, which meant an additional fee, which was, a nice additional fee, especially for a journalist who makes much less than Hollywood people make. So give me a little fee and I'll follow you anywhere. I'm the hatchling again, following the people with the checks. But I knew that consultant's fee could also be go-away money. Here's a check. Now we'll call you on opening night. Happily, they allowed me to stay for the entire shoot. I was there for basically the whole shoot of the movie. Yes, I was exceedingly happy with it because Tom and Ron especially were space junkies like me. There were no police chase scenes in this movie, so there weren't going to be any chase scenes. There were no extramarital sex scenes in the movie, so there weren't going to be any extramarital sex scenes in this property. They did consolidate a few things on the way back from the moon. There's one very dramatic engine burn that they pull off, a real high-stakes scene to get them back on a true flight trajectory. They had begun to shallow their trajectory and would have made re-entry into the atmosphere impossible. In fact, there were 4 such burns on the way back to the moon, from the moon, but they couldn't put 4 burns in the movie. It would have been it just would have been too tedious and too repetitive. They also came up with a very, very good idea for how to bring the audience up to speed on a lot of the scientific, technical aspects. You have to be able to explain to an audience what it means when a spacecraft shallows or steepens when it goes into the atmosphere, what can happen with the physics of that. You have to explain what happens with the physics of the heat shield. You have to explain what happens with the physics of the guidance system. Well, you can't have astronauts or flight directors talking to each other about these details to bring the audience up to speed, because people don't do that. They don't explain things to each other that they know. So Ron Howard had a very good idea. He said, why don't we write newscaster segments? So the newscasters will be explaining to the TV audience what they need to know, but in fact were explaining those technical details to our movie audience. And he said to me, "Would you like to write those scenes?" I said, "Sure." So I wrote a bunch of those scenes. I was in his trailer one day during lunch. He read through them, and he said, "Yeah, these are great." And he said, "So, do you want to be our newscaster?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, we're going to have to give you a haircut." And I said, "Well, I needed one anyway." I had significantly better hair. These days, I refer to my hair as the remains of the day. But I had much more hair at the time. I said, "Well, I needed a haircut anyway." And he said, "Not the kind we're going to give you." This was a 1970 haircut. So they brought me into the hair and makeup trailer the next day. They turned me away from the mirror so I couldn't see what they were doing. That already brought me up short. They finally finished. They spun me around. They showed me myself in the mirror, and I said, "I've been getting that haircut since the Nixon administration. It's okay." That's my haircut for 21 years. So I got to do my scene. I am in there looking much younger than I am and than I currently am, and it is a scene that I never tire of showing my daughters, and they never tire of watching. So,
Did you have to join AFTRA?
did I have to do what?
Join AFTRA?
Yes, I did have to join AFTRA, and I get, every time the movie is shown, I make a little bit of money. So a few times a year, I will get a check. The average check is $7.92. And I always look at that check, and I say, "You know who else got a check today? Tom Hanks got a check today. Why do I think his wasn't $7.92? It's just that kind of check that's just big enough that you can't justify tearing it up, and just small enough that I think, I don't want to go to the bank and deposit this thing." So I let them stack up and eventually do deposit them. But yes, I had to join AFTRA. I got a Screen Actors Guild Award because we won for ensemble. So I was not an actor, but I got an award, a certificate. My brother Gary was an actor. Now he's an incredibly successful playwright. He had a wonderful play last year produced in Hollywood called Walking in Space, an autobiographical play. But he had been an actor and had not made it as an actor. And one day, shortly after I won my SAG award, he was coming over. He was visiting New York. He was coming over to my apartment on a Saturday. And before he came in, I took my SAG award, took it out, and taped it to my chest, and opened the door. And Gary said, "Oh, no." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just wear this around the house every Saturday when nobody's looking. I'm sorry. Now I have it framed on my wall." But yes, I did have to join AFTRA and SAG, and I am still a member in good standing.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Of space.
It's funny you should ask me that. If you had asked me that question, oh yes, what do I think about the shift from NASA to privatization of space? If you had asked me that 10 or 15 years ago, I would have bristled all kinds of bristles. I felt it was amateur hour. I felt it was dangerous. I felt it was an abdication of the protocols and the government commitment that had gotten us from a standing start in 1961 to the surface of the moon 8 years later, which is still astonishing. I mean, the U.S. can't pass a fiscal budget resolution in 8 years, and we got to the moon. I still feel like Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic is the stuff of dilettantes. I feel that Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin, his new Shepard spacecraft that does his little pop gun suborbitals, is the stuff of dilettantes. But whatever else we may say about Elon Musk, and there's a lot we may say about Elon Musk today, that man built one heck of a rocket company, and he has become the leading launch provider, not just in the Western world. He leads the world in launches with his, especially his workhorse Falcon 9 rocket, his Falcon Heavy rocket. His Starship rocket has been chosen for the human landing system on the moon. I've met Elon a few times. The first time I met him was in his office in Hawthorne, California, the SpaceX factory floor. He just had a cubicle like anyone else. It was a big cubicle, but it was still a cubicle. And remember, Elon has no formal training in rocketry. So he had about 9 books lined up on his desk. 8 of them were variations on how to build a rocket ship. The 9th one was Walter Isaacson's biography of Albert Einstein. I thought, that tells me everything I need to know about Elon, what he admits he doesn't know and how he envisions himself. So I do think privatization is working. It's also working with getting cargo ships to and from the International Space Station. So while I was very, very dubious about privatization of space flight 15, 20 years ago, I'm a lot more sanguine about it now than I was then.
One last question.
Mm-hmm.
Who inspired you?
Who inspired me? Who inspired me? Jim inspired me. Writers inspire me, or what? What family members inspire me? My Uncle Richard inspires me. My uncle has written, he is 90, 91 years old. He is on his, I don't know, 18th, 19th, 20th book. I have no idea how many books he's written. 2 of his books were shortlisted for the National Book Award in 1997. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his book called Ashes to Ashes on the history of the Philip Morris Company and, in a larger sense, the tobacco industry in the U.S. He is an inexhaustible writer. He's a profoundly gifted writer. He's a very humble writer. He continues to work. And he was the first person I called when I thought of writing a book about Apollo 13. And he was the first person to tell me, you need to get in touch with the astronauts and get them on board. And I trusted his instincts. The first 3 agents I took the book to when I had Jim's letter of approval, but I still needed an agent. The first 3 agents I went to basically said to me some variation of, nobody is going to want to read a book about 3 guys who didn't land on the moon 21 years ago. And I thought, I think you're wrong. I'm not sure I'm in agreement on that. The 4th woman I talked to, a woman named Joy Harris, who has been my agent for 33 years. I have never been represented by anyone else but her. She heard the idea. She said, write me a proposal. If it's on the page, I'll sell this book for you. And I've always said, if I ever leave journalism, if I ever leave book publishing, the only way I will go is with Joy, and we will go like the end of Thelma and Louise, holding hands over the cliff. That's how I will leave journalism. So Joy inspires me, and my uncle inspires me.
Jeffrey, thank you for traveling from New York to speak to our sisterhood today. We could listen to you talk for hours about your vast knowledge and experience. It's a long road from Fort Garrison Elementary School to Time Magazine and beyond is fascinating. Before I let you go, I do have one very important question, just between you and me, because I
Yes.
can really keep a secret.
Okay.
Who's Time Magazine's Man of the Year, Person of the Year?
I was told I had worked there. I had not even put my bag down in my office. And I was told, by the way, we're coming up on POY. We called it Man of the Year then. Sharing that information is a fireable offense. I can tell you with absolute honesty, I do not know. Your guess is as good as mine. We keep these things very private within just the core group of people who are working on it.
So when it's announced, I'll think of you.
I'm sorry?
So when it's announced, I'll think of you keeping that secret.
Okay, yes, it will be announced
you do
December
find it.
12th. So it's coming soon.
Thank you very much, and have a safe journey home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Excuse me, when the raffle drawing is over, could everybody who knew Jeffrey or any of his brothers from Pikesville High School meet over by this exit sign, and we're going to take a group picture? Thank you.
That's a cool idea. Whose idea that was. Okay, we're going to have our raffle drawing now for those of you that bought raffles. Jeff is going to pull the winning tickets for us. Hang on. And before or as you leave, one person from each table, if you would please take the flowers and the blue runners from the tables and put them over on the table by the window wall. Okay. All right, the first winning number, raffle number, 263836. 263836. Do we have a winner? Yes? Okay, over there. We have a winner. The second number, 263822. It's Roz Kerman, 263822. Ladies, thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the luncheon. We will see you next month. You have what? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. We hope you enjoyed the luncheon. Pikesville people, over towards the window wall to have your picture taken. I don't think you have to be in that year, right? No. Right. Huh? Okay. Whatever they announced. I wasn't listening, so.
There?
I can send it out in a direct email. It's right now, I can't wait about everything, and you have more copies. I do. And I'm sure, I mean, part of the problem is like me, I'm interested in the course and I will sign up, but my husband's having surgery on Monday and the 9th, so I can't even come to the first day. So, but they, because it's multiple days, and because it's in December, people go away, and sometimes I can't commit for 4 days, so. I will. How many people do you have? That's not bad. I mean, our classes here, some can be very small, some can be huge, but 8 is a good amount. Right, and people that don't come every time, like I won't be there the first day, and I haven't signed up. Sure. They're all standard. Okay, will do.
How old were you when you were teaching in Pike's Middle? Like 18, 20? You had to be. We just said you've got to be 72, 73.
Now, I'm going to be 75.
My point exactly.
Yes, I was. Oh, it was. I had taught 1 year in Anne Arundel before I came, so that year I was 21 and 22. And then I came to Pikesville, so I was 22 when I started, and it was like over 5 years. It was 27 when I left. But then I was at the high school, and then I was like,
You were Pikesville?
yes, but I came in for Ed Turco when he got sick. He had kidney cancer, so I came in as a
Just talking
long-term
about-
sub for him.
Okay.
And then I was at Towson University, and it was really funny because first day of class, I was standing there, and Mark Goodman, I don't know if you remember him, he walks in. I had him for 2 years, and he looks at me and he goes, "Is that you, Signora Zolman?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "I have you again?" I said, "Yeah, you do." He was lucky thing.
But I had Ed Turco too, and we always talk. Barbara Brotman and I always talk about Senor Turco.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it was fun.
it
And
was
my
fun.
boys went to Gilman and one took Spanish. And there was a woman who was Latino who taught.
Excuse me one
Okay.
second. What time is this train?
3. You got time.
Okay, I just wanted to know if I had a call.
Yeah, you got a few minutes to take a picture. I want to be part of it too,
Yeah.
so because it's in Mushbaka.
Go ahead.
But it's here, and now it's coming so easily. Some except for detention.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I see
and
students...
the Yaron and all that other shit.
Doesn't matter.
No, I know.
As long as you make yourself understood.
That's exactly right.
And people always ask me, how old were you when you taught us? Because now there's not a difference in age. There was back then.
No.
Because
but
between
we were
14 and 23, it seems like a different generation.
Exactly right.
What?
Exactly.
No.
But it's funny. But I'm glad to see you because I think about it. 'Cause you're so in. And it's,
Yeah.
and then